The restaurant sparkled like a palace that night. Golden chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their crystals scattering light like falling stars. Tables draped in velvet cloths gleamed with silver cutlery, polished so bright they reflected every flicker of the candle flames. Soft violin music floated in the air, wrapping the guests in an atmosphere of elegance and wealth. Waiters in spotless white gloves moved silently, balancing trays of food that looked more like masterpieces than meals, juicy steaks, exotic seafood, desserts glazed with edible gold. The air carried the fragrance of roasted herbs and fine wine, a smell that spoke of abundance. At the center of this luxury sat Amelia Cross. To the world, she was a name people admired, envied, and whispered about, a woman who had built her empire from nothing and risen to the top. Her dress shimmered with diamonds, her wrist bore a bracelet that cost more than most families would see in a lifetime. She was surrounded by respect, power, and the soft envy of strangers. Yet, behind her carefully composed smile lay a silence. She twirled her fork in the air, her plate untouched. She wasn't hungry, not really. She was tired. Tired of the parties, the wealth, the endless compliments that never reached her heart. Her world was full of voices, yet she had never felt more alone. As laughter and chatter filled the hall, Amelia leaned back, gazing into her glass of wine. Its deep red shimmer reminded her of something she had lost long ago: warmth, love, family. For all her riches, her soul was empty. And then, everything changed. The heavy restaurant doors creaked open, and into the golden hall stepped a figure so out of place that the entire room seemed to hold its breath. It was a boy. No older than 10. His hair was messy, his clothes torn and hanging loosely from his thin frame. His shoes, if they could still be called that, were broken, barely holding together. His face was pale, his cheeks sunken, but his eyes carried a fire. A fragile light of hope that refused to die. Gasps spread among the guests. "What is he doing here?" whispered one. "Someone get him out, this is a 5-star restaurant," hissed another. The manager rushed forward, his face flushed with panic. "You don't belong here, boy. Out, before I call security." But the boy didn't move. Step by trembling step, he walked forward. His little hands shook, his lips pressed together as though summoning every ounce of courage in his fragile body. The room seemed to grow colder, quieter, as the child's footsteps echoed against marble floors meant for kings and queens. Finally, he stopped in front of Amelia's table. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at the plates filled with food, meals that cost more than his family might see in weeks. He swallowed hard, fighting the burn of hunger in his stomach. Then, slowly, he lifted his gaze to meet Amelia's. And with a trembling voice that cut deeper than any scream, he whispered, "Ma'am, may I have your leftovers?" The sound of those words shattered the room. The violins faltered into silence. Glasses stopped clinking. Even the air seemed to freeze. Guests stared, horrified, insulted, or pitying. A few turned their faces away, unwilling to witness poverty invading their golden world. The manager stepped forward again, almost shouting, "Enough! Leave at once!" But Amelia raised her hand, just slightly, yet firm enough to silence everyone. Her eyes were locked on the boy. His thin chest rose and fell with nervous breaths. His hands clenched tightly, as if preparing to be dragged away. Yet his words had carried something more powerful than desperation. They had carried dignity, the dignity of a child who wasn't begging for charity, but asking only for what others threw away. For a long moment, Amelia couldn't breathe. Her chest tightened, her throat ached. In those trembling words, she heard echoes of her own past, years she had buried deep, the nights of hunger, the tears of a mother who couldn't afford bread. Memories she thought she had escaped now stood before her, alive, staring at her with wide, pleading eyes. Her diamond bracelet suddenly felt heavy, useless. The glittering lights above seemed harsh, almost mocking. For the first time in years, she didn't see the wealth around her. She saw the world through the boy's eyes, through Eli's eyes. And inside her heart, something began to break. Amelia sat frozen. Her fork slipped from her hand, landing against the porcelain plate with a sharp clink that echoed through the silent hall. Everyone was staring, at the boy, at her, waiting for her reaction. The millionaire who had everything, what would she do with a child who had nothing? But Amelia wasn't hearing them. She wasn't even aware of the dozens of eyes piercing into her. In that moment, all she could see were his eyes. Those eyes. They weren't the eyes of someone defeated. They weren't the eyes of someone who had given up. They were weary, yes, haunted by nights of hunger and cold, but deep within them glimmered something fierce. A strength. A quiet defiance against the cruel world that had taken so much from him. Her chest tightened. Her mind pulled her back to a memory she had locked away for decades. She was a child again. Sitting on the steps of a broken house with her younger brother, watching their mother scrape together scraps of bread and watered-down soup. She remembered the shame of knocking on a neighbor's door, whispering if they had any leftovers. She remembered the sting of rejection, the sound of doors slamming in her face. And now, here it was again. Her own childhood, staring back at her through this boy. The manager leaned close, his voice sharp. "Miss Cross, please forgive this intrusion. I'll have the boy removed immediately." But Amelia didn't answer. Instead, she slowly reached forward, her trembling fingers lifting her untouched plate. Gasps filled the room. "Surely she's not," someone whispered. "She can't be serious," another muttered. Amelia ignored them all. She bent slightly, holding the plate out to him. The boy, Eli, hesitated. His thin hands hovered in the air, unsure if this was a cruel joke or a true offering. Tears welled in his eyes, but he fought them back, swallowing hard. Finally, with a courage that seemed too heavy for his small shoulders, he took the plate. For a moment, his hands brushed against hers. And that single touch, fragile, trembling, was like lightning. In that instant, Amelia felt it. The weight of his hunger. The cold nights he had endured. The loneliness of a child with no hand to hold. But also, the strength of a spirit that refused to die. Eli clutched the plate to his chest, whispering almost inaudibly, "Thank you." Amelia's throat ached. She wanted to speak, to say something, but no words came. The boy stepped back, his head lowered as if ready to retreat into the shadows once more. Yet Amelia couldn't let him go. "Wait," she said softly. Her voice broke the silence, soft but commanding enough to stop him in his tracks. He turned, his wide eyes meeting hers again. The entire restaurant leaned closer. Guests held their breath, waiting for the drama to unfold. Amelia's lips trembled as she spoke the words that would change everything. "Sit with me." The boy blinked. He didn't understand. The crowd murmured in shock. The manager nearly choked. "Miss Cross, you can't." But Amelia's eyes burned with something no one had seen in her for years. Not wealth. Not pride. But raw humanity. She pulled out the chair beside her and gestured gently. "Please. Sit." For a moment, Eli stood frozen, torn between disbelief and hope. Then, slowly, hesitantly, he walked forward. His little hand still clutched the plate as he climbed onto the chair, sitting across from glittering glasses and plates of untouched luxury. The hall erupted in whispers. Some were outraged, some astonished, some deeply moved. But Amelia didn't hear them. For the first time in years, she wasn't the billionaire everyone admired. She wasn't the untouchable figure draped in diamonds. She was simply Amelia. A woman who remembered what it was like to be hungry. A woman who couldn't turn away from a child who reminded her of everything she had once been. And as Eli took his first careful bite of food, she realized something she hadn't felt in decades. This boy wasn't just eating a meal. He was feeding her soul.